An officer of the army yourself, have you ever been involved in a coup?
I could have never been involved in a coup. As a matter of fact, I got punished because I opposed the coup.
Which one is specific?
I was the brigade commander in Port Harcourt when General Buhari was overthrown. And my GOC in Enugu instructed me to make a broadcast to support the government. And I told him nobody consulted me. I didn't know the reason why the government was overthrown. To the best of my knowledge, that man was doing an excellent job. So since you are very convinced that it was the right thing he did, make the broadcast from Enugu. You are the GOC. Within 6 months, I went on about 10 postings. And I'll tell you, I went from Port Harcourt to Sokoto. I was there for 3 months, from Sokoto to Zaria, 2 months, Zaria to Kaduna, 2 months, Kaduna to Jos. And I think somebody thought they would do that and frustrate me so I would change from what I am. You don't change an adult unless the man is mentally retarded. So I could have never taken part in a coup.
A coup d'etat is the most difficult and trying time for any soldier. It is much more difficult than going to war. War is what we are trained for, and our only worry is to make sure that the people we are leading to war understand the rules and principles of warfare. A coup, on the other hand, presents a complex set of difficulties which no training or education can adequately prepare the soldier to handle. The toughest decision for any military officer, not just for me, must be faced when a clique of officers decides to overthrow a government. You have the choice of either opposing them or simply turn the other way. Each choice presents challenges and difficulties. Opposing them exposes you to grave dangers. They can kill you to prevent you reporting them to the authorities. If the coup succeeds, your opposition mutates into insubordination. Disloyalty is one thing that has no place in the military. If you are perceived as outright disloyal or of insufficient loyalty, the consequences can be drastic. The fear of coup haunts most officers, especially during military rule. Brilliant careers have been disrupted by such takeovers. A coup, they say, is only legal if it succeeds. If it fails, and a lot have, the consequences are often disastrous for all concerned. Two options, each with potentially devastating consequences, torment and torture the souls of officers anytime there is a plot to overthrow the government, whether military or civilian. The option is either to join them or turn the other way. If you turn the other way and the coup fails, the dragnet will be expanded to rope you in either as an active participant or an accomplice. Whatever you are branded, your career in the army will be disrupted, and your life may be in grave jeopardy depending on how far the parties are willing to go to implicate you. The best case scenario will be that you will be given a ridiculous appointment that is out of line of your knowledge and experience. I belonged to this group. Such punitive posting in a strange way helped me to know the country and have a more extended command. I believed that my calling was to be a soldier, and because of that, I would have nothing to do with attempts by ambitious officers to forcibly assume political power. The Vasa coup in 1986 was particularly difficult for me. I was strongly suspected to be in the know of the coup, and perhaps for good reason. Almost every officer connected with the coup had been in Port Harcourt, where I was then stationed as the brigade commander. There was no airport in Owerri, so anybody going to the eastern part of Nigeria landed either in Enugu or Port Harcourt. It was easier to land in Port Harcourt to get to Owerri, Umuahia, and Abia. Most of the officers came through Port Harcourt. In tune with military tradition and with our esprit de corps among the different services, Navy, Air Force, and Army, once any officer arrived in Port Harcourt, I became his host. I hosted almost every officer who was connected with the coup. I approached the interrogation with my interrogators with a very confident, perhaps cocky mindset. I was innocent and I was determined to let them know that I had nothing to hide. I answered all questions put to me honestly and as best as I could. I explained my conduct and accounted for my every movement. In the end, my interrogators were convinced and not only cleared me but also gave me an imprimatur of innocence. I returned to my office and assumed my normal military duties. Let me start with the 1976 coup, the Murtala Mohammed coup. In fact, I came close and I was interviewed after every coup in Nigeria. I think more seriously than other people, and I think it was fate. I got to Lagos on 12th of February 1976. My host in Ikeja, the late Major Michelia, he used to be artillery brigade commander in Ikeja cantonment, and by that virtue, he was the cantonment commander. I came on official visit to collect books from military school. I was the chief instructor of military school in Zaria, so I came to collect the military publication from the Army Headquarters Education Library for NMS. I got to his house. He was not in, but this had been my closest friend, so I knew where the keys to the house and cars were kept. He was not married, so it was very convenient for us. I could just go into the garage, check which car I wanted to drive, pick the car and go out, and that is what I did. I drove out to Ikoyi and didn't get back until 2 a.m. By the time I got to the house, everybody had slept. In fact, my host, Major Michelia, didn't see me. Another senior officer who also came in that night, one colonel, he is late now, also did not see me. So it was in the morning on the breakfast table we met for the first time. In fact, Michelia was saying, how could I come to his house and he won't see me till morning? I said, well, I had something to do. He did something that if I were very knowledgeable, if I had suspected anything, I would have known there was something wrong. Army headquarters used to be on Marina. We were on the table for breakfast. Michelia brought a radio to the dining table. It was 7 o'clock, and instead of playing the national anthem so that they could start with the broadcast, they started playing martial music, and as usual with me, I just made a stupid comment. I said, is the head of state dead? Who is playing martial music? We laughed over it and thought maybe it was a mistake from the radio station. This was February 12, 1976. So we thought when the track was over, they would start the news. They played that track and started another track, and then we knew something was wrong. So we just stopped eating. Dimka came up with his good tidings, if you can remember, when he imposed curfew in the daytime instead of in the night because he was a confused person. Right there and then, my host and I started an argument. My comment was, who is this stupid military officer that will attempt to overthrow Murtala at the height of his popularity? Michelia challenged me, saying, how did I know that Murtala Mohammed was popular? I said, are you not in Nigeria? And we were exchanging very hot words. And then Colonel Yewa intervened, saying, gentlemen, what is wrong with you? We have a big issue here, and instead of trying to think of what to do, you are arguing about Murtala Mohammed. So we kept quiet. I was the same person who advised Michelia. I said, look, since you are the cantonment commander, get all the officers to the mess so that they can wait for instructions from the army headquarters. We waited that day until 2 o'clock when a message finally came through. That was after Babangida had succeeded in recapturing the radio station when Dimka was arrested. Those who were commanders were summoned to army headquarters. Michelia went for the meeting and came back very late. The outcome of the meeting was that there was information that if the coup did not succeed, Ibadan 2 Division was going to march against Lagos. Michelia was an artillery officer, I am an infantry officer. So he said, look, what am I supposed to do? I said, you have to deploy your troops to counter any movement from Ibadan before any assistance comes from anywhere. We drove on a Ikorodu road. They had not made the express then, if you remember. So the only way into Lagos was this way through Ikorodu, where you pass through Shagamu. I was teaching and advising him on how he should deploy, where the troops should be, to be able to counter any movements. We spent almost the entire day out and came back. I stayed with him for about 2 days. I decided to go back to Zaria. I got to the airport. One of my best friends, who is an Air Force officer, was then the airport commandant. When I went there, he said, "Where do you think you are going?" I said, "I'm going to Zaria." He asked for my pass and I told him I didn't have one. This was about 4 o'clock and he said I must be joking, that I could not leave Lagos without a pass. I left Ikeja airport and went back to Marina. I went and met General Alabi, who was then the principal general officer. He was still in the office around 6 p.m. I told him, "Sir, I came from NMS to collect books when this incident happened. I'm trapped here and I went to the airport but he insisted I must have a pass." He said, "What proof do you have that I came officially?" I took the letter that my commandant signed authorizing me to collect the books. He was not satisfied. He phoned Colonel Oduniyi, who was the commandant of military school. He said, "There is one Major Malu here who is claiming that you sent him." He said, "Yes, that is my chief instructor military. I authorized him to come and collect books for the NMS." It was then he signed the pass and gave me. By the time I got back to Ikeja, there was no flight. I had to spend one extra day. It was on the 4th day I took the morning flight back to Kaduna, where my car was parked and I drove to Zaria. I was in my house 3 days after watching the television when I saw my host tied and was being executed. I sat in that chair and was almost paralyzed. I started retracing my steps and remembered that if I had been sensible, this man had no reason to come to the dining table with a radio because we were all rushing to finish breakfast and go to work. But more than that, we went to see Major Dabar at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. There was nothing wrong with him, he just chickened out and thought the coup was achieved so that he could get the appointment he wanted. We got there, got into an argument, insulted ourselves, and I left. We went to see Major Ola Ogumekon. He was one of the key planners also, but I think my presence prevented them from actually discussing anything. It was 3 weeks after they executed these people the investigations properly started. They were coming to take me from NMS to Kaduna. In fact, the intelligence officer that used to come would come with a Volkswagen. I had a Toyota Crown. I told him I would get to that place before you, do not be afraid. So I would drive and go. I would be in Kaduna for almost 40 minutes before he arrived. I went through interrogation every day for about 2 weeks. My story was consistent. I couldn't deny those people. I knew all of them. I saw them, but I didn't know anything about the coup. It was at the end of it I was exonerated. A lot of other people who went for the same interview were either retired or dismissed. That was my first encounter.
As an officer of the army yourself, have you ever been involved in a coup?
I could have never been involved in a coup. As a matter of fact, I got punished because I opposed the coup.
Which one is specific?
I was the brigade commander in Port Harcourt when General Buhari was overthrown. And my GOC in Enugu instructed me to make a broadcast to support the government. And I told him nobody consulted me. I didn't know the reason why the government was overthrown. To the best of my knowledge, that man was doing an excellent job. So since you are very convinced that it was the right thing he did, make the broadcast from Enugu. You are the GOC. Within 6 months, I went on about 10 postings. And I'll tell you, I went from Port Harcourt to Sokoto. I was there for 3 months, from Sokoto to Zaria, 2 months, Zaria to Kaduna, 2 months, Kaduna to Jos. And I think somebody thought they would do that and frustrate me so that I would change from what I am. You don't change an adult unless the man is mentally retarded. So I could have never taken part in a coup. And that's the dilemma officers suffered. Because when your commander-in-chief or whoever eventually becomes the head of state speaks, he's speaking for every one of you. And you cannot go out and say, no, I was not a party to that decision. Those were the things that frustrated some officers and got some to leave the service or some to degenerate into something else.
The Vasa coup of 1985, I was a brigade commander in Port Harcourt. Almost everybody connected with the coup, one way or the other, had passed through Port Harcourt. As at that time, there was no airport in Owerri. So any trip to the east if you went by air was either through Enugu or Port Harcourt. And being the brigade commander, if you came to Port Harcourt, it was my responsibility to host you. Nobody arrested me. They invited me to come to the intelligence office for questioning. I thought I was the only one. When I came, Mike Ahigbe was there. If you remember, I think was the governor of Ondo State. David Mark was the governor of Niger State. Tunde Ogbeha was also there. Admiral Pobeni was there. These are all my classmates I'm mentioning. When we came, it was like a joke. There was one Colonel Obi. This one is far senior to us. He was one of the reabsorbed officers who was serving as brigade commander in Makurdi. We went through a lot of interrogation. They were satisfied and they asked me to go. In fact, in my own case, when they asked me to go verbally, I told General Sami Sani, who was the president of the Special Investigation Panel, that look, you invited me with a signal. Everybody in Port Harcourt has concluded that General Malu is involved in a coup. You have to give me a paper. I'm not going back. I waited for another 3 hours until I got a letter that cleared me that I was not involved in the coup. But let me tell you how close I was to the coup. One of my childhood friends, Wing Commander Adamu Sakaba, was serving in Makurdi. I gave him my guest house, very well furnished. My family was in Port Harcourt with me. So I told him, look Adamu, use this place so that people will not come and carry away my things. He actually went and held a meeting to overthrow the government in that house. I mean the Vatsa coup. They actually held a meeting in my own guest house. That was one. The same Adamu Sakaba had come to Port Harcourt, spent 2 weeks with me. We were doing parties every day. We even used to go to the office together. In fact, in his own case, it was after he was executed that I read what he said in the courts. They asked him that we were cheerful friends. He was with me for this length of time in Port Harcourt. How come he did not invite me to join in the coup? He gave a very honest answer, which makes me remember him almost every day. Because if he had said anything different, I could have been killed even as an innocent man. His answer was that he actually came to Port Harcourt to invite me, but when he saw the way I was living, doing parties every day, he changed his mind. Every day he was with me in the office. Either General Babangida or General Abacha would call and I would start telling them how Port Harcourt was and all that. He said he was sure I would betray him, that somebody who was enjoying this way would not be part of this thing. That is the third thing. One of the officers, a pilot who used to fly General Babangida, squadron leader Ahura, who is also from my state, came on Wednesday with the late Senator Taka's son and one other chap who is the son of the late Totiv. They used to come because partying in Port Harcourt was like a daily thing. They said they wanted me to throw a party for them, and it was the same day I got information that my house in Makurdi was burgled. So I told them, since you people have nothing doing, you will wait here. I will go and see what was stolen so that I can come and arrange replacements. That I will come back the following day. There were 3 of them that came in the same vehicle. The 2 of them said, well, we have nothing doing, so we'll wait for you. Ahura was supposed to fly Babangida the day after, so he said he had to go to Lagos. We drove 2 hours in the car from Port Harcourt to Makurdi. I was driving my Mazda RX-7. The question was, what was this officer discussing with me? That was what the Special Investigation Panel wanted me to satisfy them on. I said, well, it should have been the other way around. This is an officer that was not even in school when I was leaving secondary school, which he also attended. So should he be the one inviting me to join in overthrowing the government or the other way around? They understood the implication of what I was saying, so I satisfied them on every point. On February 19, 1998, I officially took over as General Officer commanding the 2nd Mechanized Division from Major General Bashir Magashi. I settled down to doing what I did best, commanding soldiers. My life was relatively uncomplicated. I was away from the limelight and was free to discharge my military duties without undue and often unnecessary and intrusive public scrutiny. Returning to Ibadan as the General Officer commanding the 2nd Mechanized Division was more like a homecoming for me. I had started my career as a lieutenant in Benin, one of the units under the 2nd Mechanized Division. Here I was nearly 25 years later, returning to the same division, this time as the general officer commanding the division. Upon assuming command, I addressed the officers and the soldiers of the division at the parade ground, Odigbo Cantonment. I warned them against distraction and urged them not to venture into any profession that was alien to them. Restoring professionalism and maintaining order and discipline were my main goals, and I said so in my address to the soldiers. I admonished them, those of you who are in the habit of combining soldiering with other activities to achieve selfish ends must stop forthwith. The present administration in the country has resolved to convince the civil populace that soldiers in whom they so much believe can protect their lives and properties, as well as the nation's territorial integrity against foreign aggression. The pith of my message to them was that I was not prepared to tolerate tardiness or unprofessional behavior. I made it clear to them that this was a new regime and I expected them to act like professional soldiers. My appointment as the General Officer commanding the 2nd Mechanized Division also made me a member of the Provisional Ruling Council, the highest legislative body in the country. Theoretically, it functions like the National Assembly and promulgated laws for the order and good government of the administration. It was called Supreme Military Council under the reign of Generals Gowon, Obasanjo, and Buhari. General Babangida, upon assuming power in 1985, changed the name of the body to Armed Forces Ruling Council. The name was again changed to Provisional Ruling Council by General Abacha when he became the head of state in 1993. Despite changes in the name, the body performed basically the same functions throughout its existence. Just as I settled into my normal routine military duties, another event rocked my peace: the revelation of a coup plot against General Sani Abacha. On December 21st, 1997, the then Chief of Defense Staff, Major General Abdulsalami Abubakar, announced that an attempt to overthrow the federal government had been uncovered. He further stated that a 15-man special investigation panel headed by the commander of the National War College, Major General Chris Garba, had been set up to determine the level of involvement of the suspects. The announcement of the coup plot against General Abacha was received with mixed feelings. A vast majority of Nigerians doubted the story. Some viewed it as a hoax concocted by the government to silence perceived enemies of the state. Public skepticism was understandable given that the Abacha regime had spawned a feeble era of plots, intrigues, accusations, and counter-allegations. Just 2 years earlier, another batch of coup plotters, including retired General Obasanjo and Yaradua, had been sentenced to death by firing squad for their roles in the alleged attempt to topple the government of General Abacha. The sentence was later commuted to terms of imprisonment by General Abacha. Within the military, it was difficult to know who was involved and who to trust. Security operatives had infiltrated every unit and watched superior officers very closely. Also, the Abacha regime, fretting over demands for restoration of civilian rule, closely monitored the civil society. There was also the story that General Abacha's loyalists had mounted a venomous campaign to deal with perceived opponents both within and outside the armed forces. It was therefore difficult to say without more information whether the coup plot was real or just a phantom, trumped up by the security operatives to silence those perceived as insufficiently loyal to General Abacha. It was difficult to find people who were objective and impartial in the matter. Everyone's view was subjectively influenced by what he or she thought of Abacha and his regime. Those who hated and disliked everything he stood for saw the coup as a hoax. Those who had sympathized with him believed there was a coup attempt to unseat him. I had just returned from Liberia and therefore did not have any information or personal knowledge to enable me make an informed judgment about the alleged coup plots. Moreover, my colleagues knew about my disgust for coup and would not dare involve me in any attempt to overthrow the government. My reaction was remarkably consistent and unsurprising to those familiar with me. I have always detested coup and wondered why anybody in his right mind would risk everything for power. Soon after the revelation, I was robbed of the luxury of sitting on the sidelines and expressing my opinion like other Nigerians. I was appointed the chairman of the Special Military Tribunal formed to try the suspects. The Special Military Tribunal was empaneled following the recommendations of a Special Investigation Panel headed by Major General Chris Garba. It consisted of 6 members, besides the chairman, drawn from various branches of the armed forces. The Special Military Tribunal was constituted pursuant to the Treason and Other Offences Act, Cap 444, laws of the Federation of Nigeria. The Defense Chief of Administration, Rear Admiral Festus Pobeni, who announced the setting up of the tribunal, also informed the press that the tribunal would sit in Jos. He further disclosed that the tribunal had only 1 month to complete its assignment. This was the first time a special military tribunal set up to try coup plotters would be seated outside Lagos. All other trials of coup plotters had been held in Lagos. They included the 1976 trials of Lieutenant Colonel Dimka and his cohorts, the 1985 trial of Major General Vata and others involved in the coup attempt to topple the Babangida administration, the 1990 trials of those involved in the Oka-led attempt to change the government of Babangida, and the 1995 trial regarding the alleged coup plot involving retired General Obasanjo and Yaradua. This assignment affected me both personally and professionally. I knew some of the officers personally and instinctively empathized with them. In fact, one of the suspects, Major General Adisa, had been my coursemate at the Nigerian Defense Academy, and we had remained very close friends over the years. I also had frequent social and professional interaction with some of the officers. So much was on my mind. My reputation, professional integrity, and indeed my humanity were all on the line. I had spent my entire adult career in the military asserting my independence and my right to speak the truth at all times. This assignment had a tremendous potential to undermine all that. I was determined not to allow myself to be used as a cat's paw to achieve preoccupied outcomes. I would go where the facts led me, wherever that might be. I am not a lawyer and have never pretended to be familiar with the nuance of a trial, but I also know that the instinct for justice is innate in all human beings. I knew that people had taken sides and that I would be recognized no matter the outcome. Again, those were matters beyond my control. I had learned early in life to worry only about matters within my control. In this case, that meant being fair to all the parties concerned. I knew that justice must be considered from the viewpoints of 3 involved entities: the accused persons, the army whose norms had been violated, and the nation that demanded stability in government process. All had equal claims to justice. I had maintained a delicate balance in the repartee among all these parties. I knew if I followed the rules and kept an open mind, I would arrive at a just conclusion and a judgment that met acceptable standards of justice. The idea of using a special military tribunal to try suspected coup plotters was not new to Nigeria. It had been used several times by several military regimes to deal with coup plotters. It was used in 1976 to deal with Dimka and his fellow coup plotters who took part in the attempted coup that led to the assassination of the late head of state, General Mohammed. It was again used in 1985 to try General Vasa and his fellow accomplices who plotted to topple the government of General Babangida. 5 years later, in 1990, a special military tribunal was empaneled to try Major Oka and other soldiers who attempted to assume power from General Babangida. In 1995, another special military tribunal was set up to try civilians and soldiers accused of attempting to topple General Abacha's government. We had enough history and precedents to guide and direct us. It only remained for me and other members of the tribunal to contain our emotions and do justice to our fellow citizens. The tribunal framework is relatively simple and uncomplicated. The only major difference between regular court and special military tribunal is that the proceedings of a tribunal are conducted behind closed doors and out of public view because of security concerns. The prosecution presents its case, and the accused persons have the ample opportunity to defend themselves and to confront witnesses against them. Both sides are represented by trained lawyers who assist them in their presentation of evidence and testimony according to the rules of the tribunal. Properly administered, the tribunal framework is capable of producing justice if the parties play by the rules. On February 18, 1988, the suspects were publicly arraigned before the tribunal. The list of suspects was rather lengthy and included Lieutenant General Oladipo Dia, Major General Tajuddin Olarenwaju, Major General Abdulkarim Adisa, Colonel Yakubu, Colonel Edward Jando, Lieutenant Colonel Akiode, Professor Femi Odekunle, Mrs. Shola Shoili, Miss Halima Bawa, Lieutenant Colonel Yakasi, Major Olusegun Fadipe, Major Mohammed, Major Ishaku, Lieutenant Commander Sultan, Warrant Officer Koka Oladosu, Staff Sergeant Moses Eli, Corporal Kontagora, Corporal Eddie Egbonu, Deputy Superintendent of Police Bawa Machidu, Mr. Olatimehi Abimbola, Mr. Isaiah Adebowale, Mr. Ilyasu Mohammed, Mr. Adebola Adebanjo, Mr. Niron Malaolu, Mr. Odeniyi Ademola, Mr. Mukhtar Meidebino, and Lieutenant Colonel Akiode. Although the tribunal was to be held behind closed doors, the press were allowed to witness the inauguration session. The arraignment exposed me to the human dimensions of a failed coup attempt. Though I had seen pictures of the coup suspects on television and newspapers, I had never seen them up close. I was moved to see army generals, and especially my coursemate and good friend, General Adisa, in shackles, helpless and visibly shaken. The images of generals in shackles, robbed of their integrity, remain etched in my memory. Till this day, that image gives me chills. All kinds of questions came to my mind. How did they come to this? Was it greed, envy, or naked lust for power? What was it all for? Was it worth it? They were already rich and powerful men who had risked everything to attain even greater power. Perhaps only they can tell why they had done what they were accused of doing. I quickly reminded myself that whatever motivated or impelled them to do what they were accused of doing was no longer relevant. They were here now, and my job was to get to the bottom of the case. Much as I felt some sympathy for them, I also knew that the agony was for the most part self-inflicted. They had a choice in the matter, and for one reason or the other, they had chosen to plot a coup. The pain on their faces reminded all of us of a vestige of an ambition gone awry, the price, or better still, the consequences of failure. Just a couple of weeks ago, these suspects enjoyed the majesty and prestige that went with their ranks and positions. The emotions on this day were markedly different. Here they were, shackled, scared, and trapped in devices of their own making. It is not a pleasant experience to sit in judgment over your comrades in arms, especially when one of those comrades happens to be your dear friend and old classmate. Anyone who has sat in judgment over those can attest to the effects of such an assignment on the mind of the judge. My years in the army and my official assignments have been characterized by candor and fairness. I have not in any of my public responsibilities allowed my emotions or preferences to dethrone my objectivity. This was another assignment that required me to demonstrate my independence and commitment to the truth. This assignment was significantly different from most other assignments. The lives of my comrades and other civilians, the integrity of the government, and indeed the stability of Nigeria were all on the line. I was therefore determined that my commitment to the truth and love for my country would transcend everything else. I convened the tribunal and read a prepared text. I reassured all that I was going to be fair and firm. I would insist that all the processes and established practices and procedures would be followed scrupulously. Each suspect would enjoy the full panoply of rights allowed by the enabling statute. They would have the right to confront their accusers and demonstrate their innocence through whatever legal means they chose. I emphatically told them that I would not allow the tribunal proceedings to disintegrate into a farce. This was a military tribunal and not a political soapbox from which people could play to the gallery. I hoped that my statements would plant firmly in the minds of all concerned that I had no room for shenanigans. This, after all, was a special military tribunal, and I was prepared to maintain decorum in the courtroom. The prosecution opened its case against the suspects. They systematically marshaled the evidence against the suspects. I was amazed at the amount of evidence against the key suspects. The evidence was clear and convincing, beyond a reasonable doubt, and indeed beyond all shadows of doubt. General Oladipo had led an attempt to forcibly overthrow the federal government. Because the accused had variously alleged that they were set up by some officers to do what they had done, the tribunal had invited the officers who were accused of participating in the setup. These officers included Lieutenant General Isha Abamei, the Chief of Army Staff, Major General Bashir Magashi, the Commander, Lagos Garrison Command, Major General I.A. Sabu, the Director of Military Intelligence, and Major Hamza Al-Mustafa, the Chief Security Officer of the Commander-in-Chief. After 3 weeks of proceedings in which the parties, the prosecution, and the accused persons had ample opportunities to present their cases, the tribunal reserved judgment for the chairman of the panel. As I entered the room to deliver the judgment, I was overwhelmed by emotion. I was going to deliver a judgment that would forever change the fortunes, careers, and lives of my fellow comrades in arms and their families. I was about to announce a sentence of death by firing squad on fellow soldiers, and especially my friend and coursemate, General Adisa. The room was quiet, and there was immense suspense, perhaps anxiety. A sense of fear and despair infused all of the accused persons. Who would not betray such emotion in the face of a similar situation? The drama and theater of the trials had vanished. All the parties knew that the hour of judgment had come. Very soon they would learn their fate and find out if they would live or die. All of us in the room, members of the tribunal, accused persons, and the press knew that something serious and potentially life-changing was about to happen. Things would never be the same again for most, if not all of us. I went on to deliver the following judgment.
General D.O.D. Major General A.T. Olaruwaju, Major General A.K. Adisa, Lieutenant Colonel O. Akinyode, Major O. Fadikwe, Major B.M. Mohammed, W.2 Koka Oladisun, Corporal I. Kontagora, Corporal Edi Ebunu, Engineer A. Adebanjo, Mr. Owati Main Abimbola, Mrs. Shola Shoele, and Professor Femi Odekunle. Lieutenant General D.O.D. Charge 1, treason, finding guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding guilty. Major General A.T. Olaruwaji, Charge 1, treason, finding guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding guilty. Major General A.K. Adisa, Charge 1, treason, guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding guilty. Lieutenant Colonel O. Akinyode, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding guilty. Major O. Fadikwe, Charge 1, treason, finding guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding guilty. Major B.M. Mohammed, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. W. Koka Oladisun, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. Corporal Ibrahim Kontagora, Charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. Corporal Eji Obuno, charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. Engineer A. Adebanjo, charge 1, treason, finding guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. Mr. Ola Owatimeyin Abimbola, charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty. Mrs. Chola Shoile, charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty of the charge but guilty of concealment of treason. Professor Femi Odekunle, charge 1, treason, finding not guilty. Charge 2, conspiracy to commit treason, finding not guilty.
Major General Malu says all sentences are subject to confirmation by the Provisional Ruling Council. The tribunal further ordered that all properties of any of the convicted persons which are illegally acquired or for which they could not give proper account of shall be forfeited to the federal government, while all others not found guilty of their charges are discharged and acquitted immediately.